heavy key turned in a rusted lock. The front door of an old mansion pushed open into 40 years of dust. A pair of trembling hands pulled a black scarf tighter against the cold. Floorboards groaned under careful steps. A chandelier hung dark above the staircase, every crystal coated in gray. Sheets covered the furniture along the long walls. A folded letter sat on a small side table near the door. Her fingers lifted it. The wax seal cracked open. The woman in that foyer was 67 years old. Her name was Ruth Vance. She had not stood inside this house since her brother threw her out of it. Inside the letter were 5 words. "It is yours. Forgive me." He had just left her the entire mansion, 40 years after the door slammed. Why did he carry that guilt to his grave? Stay with me on this one. The call had come on a Tuesday in October, the kind of gray morning that made Ruth want to stay in her small apartment with a second cup of tea and her radio. She picked up on the third ring. A clipped voice on the line introduced himself as Edmund Crane, the family attorney. He used her brother's full name, Harold Vance. He used the word deceased. He used the word inheritance. Ruth set the cup down with both hands so it would not rattle on the saucer. She had not spoken with her brother in 40 years. She had not stepped foot in Hollowfield Manor in 40 years. She had built a quiet life in a city 3 states away, working in a public library, paying her own rent, eating most nights at the same diner near the bus stop. She had a small circle of women her own age who met for cards on Thursdays. She had a cat named Biscuit who had outlived 2 husbands she had never had. She had taught herself not to think about the house with the long drive and the white columns. She had taught herself not to think about her brother's voice the night he told her to leave. She had taught herself a great many things in 40 years. Now Mr. Crane was telling her that the house was hers. The land, the library, the garden gone to weeds. Everything. She drove out 3 days later. She packed 1 suitcase. She left her cat with the woman across the hall. She did not call anyone else. There was no one else to call. The road out of the city narrowed into farmland, and then into the long ridge that ran above the river. She remembered the turn before she saw the sign. Hollowfield Lane. The gate at the end of the lane had been painted black once. Now it was the color of old iron and rain. She got out of the car. She pushed the gate. It opened. The driveway curled up through oaks that were taller than she remembered. The house came into view between the trunks, and for a long second she could not breathe. White columns. Slate roof. 2 chimneys. The front porch sagged on the left side. Every window on the second floor had been shuttered from the inside. She parked at the foot of the steps and sat with her hands on the wheel. Mr. Crane met her at the door. He was thin, dressed in a gray suit too warm for the season, with a leather folder tucked under his arm. He had her brother's signature on the front page and her name on the second. He explained the terms without sitting down. Sole heir. No conditions. Property taxes paid through the end of the year. A bank account attached to the estate with enough for repairs. He passed her the key. He did not smile. He said he would be in touch in 3 days for the paperwork. Then he left her alone with the house. Ruth carried her suitcase into the foyer. She walked from room to room without turning on any light. The drawing room with its covered piano. The dining room with its long table under a sheet. The kitchen with its iron stove and its big window looking out at a yard full of crows. The library where her father had taught her how to read. She put her hand on the spine of a book and felt 40 years pull at her chest. She found a bedroom on the second floor with a clean bed and a vase of dried lavender on the nightstand. Someone had prepared it. She did not know who. She set down her suitcase. She sat on the edge of the bed. She did not cry. She had spent her tears long ago in a room 3 states away. The bedroom had been hers as a girl. The wallpaper was the same pale yellow with the small blue flowers. The mirror above the dresser was the same. The window looked down on the garden, where she had buried a turtle when she was 9. She had not asked to be put in this room. Someone had decided for her. She wondered who had decided. She put the question away with all the others. That first evening, a man came up the drive in a black truck. He did not ring the bell. He walked in through the back door as if he still lived there. Ruth heard the boots in the kitchen before she saw him. She came down the back stairs slowly. He was tall and broad-shouldered in his late 40s, with her brother's jaw and her brother's eyes. He did not introduce himself. He did not have to. Aunt Ruth. His name was Daniel. He was Harold's only son. She had last seen him at 6 years old, on the day her brother put her out of this house. He was now a grown man holding a clipboard. "I'm here to make this easy on both of us," he said. "The house is too big for you. You don't have the money to keep it up. I have a buyer ready by the end of the month. Sign the listing and I'll wire you a check for half. You can go home." She looked at him for a long moment. "This is my home," she said. Believe me, those 4 words changed everything that came after. Daniel set the clipboard on the kitchen counter. He did not raise his voice. He never had to. "Don't be foolish, Aunt Ruth. You haven't been in this house since I was a child. You don't know what's wrong with it. The roof leaks. The foundation has cracks. The wiring is half a century out of date. You'll spend every dollar you have, and the place will still fall down around you." She watched his hands. Hands like her brother's. Steady, comfortable with paper, comfortable telling other people what to do. "I'll think about it," she said. He smiled then. It was not a kind smile. "Take a few days. Walk the rooms. You'll see I'm right. I'll come back on Friday." He picked up the clipboard. He left through the same back door. The black truck rolled down the drive. She watched it until it was gone. That night she did not sleep well. She heard the house. Old houses talk. Beams settle. Pipes knock. Pages of forgotten books slide off shelves when a draft moves through a corridor. She listened to all of it, and she thought about her brother and the letter on the side table by the front door. In the morning she started to clean. She began in the parlor. She pulled the sheets off the furniture. Dust rose around her shoulders. She opened the windows. She wiped down the piano. Inside the bench, she found sheet music in her own handwriting from the year she was 18. She set it on top of the piano and kept moving. In the dining room, she found a silver photograph frame face down on the sideboard. She turned it over. It was a picture of the whole family on the front porch. Her father, her mother, Harold at 14, Ruth at 10. They were all smiling. She looked at the picture for a long time. Then she set it back, face up this time, and went on. In the kitchen, she found a tin of her mother's recipes. Cards in her mother's careful penmanship. Pot roast with onions. Apple pie. A bread her grandmother had taught her mother to make in the wood-fired oven. Ruth held the tin against her chest for a long minute before she set it on the counter. In the pantry, she found a sealed envelope addressed in her father's hand to her, dated the year she was thrown out. The seal had never been broken. She put the envelope into the pocket of her cardigan to read later. She would read it that night by the bedroom lamp, and she would learn that her father had loved her without condition until the day he died. But that came later. She worked all day. By evening her arms ached. Her back ached. She did not stop. The library was last. The library was where the trouble had started 40 years ago. She knew that before she opened the door. She pulled the sheets off the reading chairs. She climbed the rolling ladder and dusted the upper shelves. She ran her finger along the spines. Most of the books were the ones her father had loved. Histories, biographies, a row of green leather volumes about the river country. On the second shelf from the top, she found a book of poetry her father had given her on her 16th birthday. She pulled it down. A piece of paper slid out. It was a check, made out to her, dated the month she had been thrown out, signed by her father, never cashed. The amount was the full half of the family trust. Her hands shook. She read the date again. She read the signature. She sat down on the top step of the ladder, and she stared at that check until the light through the window turned gold. Her brother had told her 40 years ago that their father had cut her out, that the trust was gone, that she would have to leave because she had stolen money from it. He had stood in this very library and told her these things, and she had believed him, because he was older, because she was 27 and frightened, because the lawyer at the time had nodded along. The check in her hand was proof of a different story. She climbed down. She set the check on her father's desk. She lit the green banker's lamp. She started to look. She pulled books from the shelves at random. She opened drawers. She moved a globe. She lifted a rug. She did not know what she was looking for. When she pulled down a tall book on river commerce on the bottom shelf, the entire bookcase moved. It moved an inch. Just an inch. But it moved. She stepped back. The bookcase was a single tall unit, 8 feet high, built into the corner of the library. It had a small brass keyhole at the bottom that she had never noticed as a child. She knelt. She pressed her fingers into the gap behind the shelf. She felt cold air. There was a draft coming through the wall. She pulled the case toward her. It swung out on a hidden hinge with the smooth, slow weight of a vault door. Behind it was a narrow opening cut into the brick. Behind that opening was a wooden staircase going down into the dark. She stood there for a long minute, and she did not breathe. Then she stepped back into the library. She closed the bookcase. She turned off the green lamp. She walked slowly down the hall to the kitchen. She set the kettle on the iron stove. She watched the gas flame come up blue around the bottom. She took down a single china cup. She poured the tea. She carried the cup to the dining room, and she sat down at the long table, and she lifted the cup to her lips. The tea was very hot. The dining room was very quiet. The house had told her nothing for 40 years, and now it had told her the first true thing. She thought, I will wait until morning. She did not get to wait until morning. A floorboard creaked in the foyer. Ruth set down the cup. Slow. Very slow. She listened. The house went silent in the way that only houses go silent when somebody else is standing inside them. She heard a second footstep. She heard the soft drag of a coat against the umbrella stand. The back door had been bolted. The front door had been locked. Someone had come in with a key. She moved without thinking. She left the dining room. She slipped along the wall of the hallway and stepped behind the velvet curtain that hung in the doorway to the music room. She waited. She held her breath. Daniel walked into the dining room. He looked at the cup on the table. He looked at the empty chair. He turned slowly in a full circle, scanning the room like a man looking for an animal he had cornered. Aunt Ruth. He called it the way you call a child you have caught doing something. He stepped into the kitchen. He stepped back out. He walked to the foot of the main staircase, and he listened. Then he walked toward the library. Ruth's heart was loud in her chest. She watched him through the gap in the curtain. He had not come back on Friday. It was Wednesday night. He had let himself in with a key her brother must have made for him years ago, before any of this began. She did not have a phone in her hand. She did not have a weapon. She had the cup of tea sitting on the dining room table to tell him she was still in the house. She had the bookcase she had closed before she left the library. She had no idea if she had closed it well enough. She had to know. She slipped out from behind the curtain. She crossed the hall in her stocking feet. She climbed the back stairs to the second floor. She moved through the upstairs hallway without making a sound. She reached the small interior window above the library, the one that opened onto the gallery. She looked down. Daniel was standing in the library. He was facing the corner bookcase. He had a flashlight. He had a black case the size of a briefcase. He had not opened the bookcase yet. He was waiting. A second man walked into the library from the hallway. He wore a long gray coat. He carried a folder. It was Edmund Crane, the lawyer. "It's still here," Daniel said. "You said she didn't go near it," Crane said. "She didn't. I was watching from the ridge. The light was on. The light is off now. She's in her room." Crane turned slowly. "She's in her room." "She is." "You know that for a fact." "I know my aunt. She's 67 years old. She drove out here alone. She's exhausted. She's asleep." Ruth's breath stayed shallow. She did not move. Crane set his folder on her father's desk. "Open it." Daniel pulled the River Commerce book. The bookcase moved. He swung it out. The flashlight beam went down the stairs. "Now here's the thing." Ruth understood, standing above them, what they were doing. She understood it without anyone saying it out loud. They had not come to make her a buyout offer. They had come to retrieve whatever was hidden in the lower room before she found it. They had been planning for her arrival. They had probably been planning for her brother's death for years. She also understood something else. If they took what was down those stairs tonight, she would never see it. She would sign the listing in 3 days. She would go back to her apartment 3 states away. She would die not knowing. She would not allow that. If you are still with me on this one, hit that subscribe button. It tells me you want the rest of these stories. And believe me, this one is just getting started. Ruth backed away from the gallery window. She walked silently to the back stairs. She went down. She went through the kitchen. She slipped into the pantry. She lifted a loose floorboard she remembered from childhood, the one her father had once used to hide a Christmas gift. Under the board was an old service bell, the kind that used to call the staff to the dining room. She lifted it out. She set it on the kitchen counter. Then she walked in her stocking feet straight into the library. "Good evening, Daniel," she said. He spun. Crane went pale. The flashlight beam jumped to her face. She did not flinch. "Aunt Ruth," Daniel said. "You should be in bed." "I should be a great many things," she said. "Step away from the staircase." Daniel did not step away from the staircase. He stepped closer to it. He set his case down on the second step. He looked at her the way he had looked at her at the kitchen counter that first night, only there was no clipboard now, and there was no smile. "You don't know what's down there," he said. "I know what isn't down there," Ruth said. "I know it isn't yours." Crane closed his folder. He did not look at her. He looked at Daniel. He gave a small nod that Daniel understood without anything more being said. Crane began to walk toward the library door. He intended to lock her in. She saw it on his face. She rang the bell. It was an old brass thing on the kitchen counter. She had pulled it before she walked in. She had tied it to a string. The string ran out of the kitchen window. The string was tied to a heavy iron door knocker on the front porch. The knocker dropped against the front door with a sound that shook the whole house. The deputy on the porch heard it. Believe me, she had not driven out to that house alone with no plan. On the drive up the ridge she had stopped at the county sheriff's office, and she had told a young deputy who used to come into her father's library as a boy that an old woman was about to take possession of a house her family did not want her to have. She had asked him to be near. She had not told him why. She had told him she would ring if she needed him. She had rung. Daniel heard the iron knocker. His face changed. The deputy's boots came up the porch. The front door was unlocked from the outside with a thump and a turn. The deputy walked in. He was 30 years old and built like a fence post, and had her father's old library card laminated in his wallet to this day. He stepped into the library with his hand on the radio at his shoulder. "Evening, Mr. Vance. Mr. Crane." Crane's eyes closed for one slow second. "Aunt Ruth," the deputy said, Is everything as you wanted it tonight? Not yet, she said. But it will be in a minute. Daniel stepped back from the staircase. Mr. Crane, set your folder on the desk and step away from it. They did. She took the flashlight off the second step. She walked down the staircase. The lower room was small. Brick on 3 sides. A long table in the middle. A bank of filing cabinets along the back wall. A safe in the corner. A single bear bulb on a brass chain hung from the low ceiling. She pulled the chain. The bulb came on yellow and steady. The air smelled of old paper and machine oil. The floor was swept clean. Someone had been down here, and not long ago, and they had taken care of the place the way a man takes care of a workshop he uses often. On the table sat a single open ledger. She turned it toward the light. It was 40 years old. It was her brother's handwriting. It was a record of withdrawals from the family trust between January and August of the year she had been blamed and exiled. Each withdrawal was signed Ruth Vance, with a careful copy of her signature. None of them were her hand. They were forgeries. She opened the filing cabinet behind the ledger. Inside were the original deposit slips. The bank had been her father's bank. The teller's signature on each slip was the same. The teller's signature was Edmund Crane's, dated the year before he became the family lawyer. Each slip showed a deposit into an account she had never opened, in a town she had never lived in, with a routing number she had never seen. The money had been laundered through that account into a holding company her brother had owned under another name. The trail was clean and patient, and made by the same 2 hands for 40 years. In a second drawer she found the letters. Letters from her brother to Crane. Letters from Crane to her brother. Plain language. No code. They spoke of her by name. They called her the problem. They called the document the cure. They congratulated each other on a quiet harvest year after year. She opened the safe in the corner. She knew the combination. Her father had given it to her on her 16th birthday. Her brother had never known she still remembered it. Inside the safe was an envelope. Inside the envelope was the original last will and testament of her father, dated 3 months before his death. It left the house, the trust, and every acre to both his children in equal shares. It named Ruth specifically. It named her by name. It used the word beloved. The document her brother had used to disinherit her 40 years ago was a forgery. The lawyer who had nodded along that day in this very library had signed both sides of it. She climbed the stairs back into the library with the will in one hand and the ledger in the other. The deputy was still standing in the doorway. Daniel was still by the staircase. Crane had not moved. She set the documents on her father's desk under the green banker's lamp. "Read them," she said. The deputy read them. Daniel watched his shoes. Crane watched the window, as if there were somewhere left to go. "I'm going to need both of you to come with me," the deputy said. He said it quietly. He said it the way a man says it when he has already made up his mind. He keyed the radio at his shoulder. He called for a second car. Daniel did not look at his aunt as he was led out. Crane did. Crane looked at her the way a man looks at a verdict. The front door closed behind them. The house went very still. Ruth sat down in her father's chair. She sat for a long time. The green banker's lamp warmed the wood under her hands. The deputy's radio chatter faded down the drive. She read the original will all the way through. She read every line. She read her own name. She read the word beloved. She read the date her father had signed it, 3 months before he died in this same room at this same desk. She set the paper down. She put her hand flat on it. She did not cry. She had spent her tears long ago in a room 3 states away. Outside, the night moved over the ridge. Crows woke and quieted. The river breast below the bluff. Ruth turned the lamp off. She walked through the rooms of the house in the dark, and she did not turn anything else on. She knew every corner. She had known them at 10 years old. She knew them again now at 67. In the morning, Mr. Crane's law firm sent a young woman in a navy suit. She had a different folder. She had a tape recorder. She had questions. Ruth answered them with the original will in her lap and a cup of tea on the side table. She answered for 2 hours. She did not waver. By the end of the week, the bank had frozen what was left of her brother's accounts. By the end of the month, the original will had been filed with the county. The forged document was entered into evidence. The teller's signature on the deposit slips was matched, in a state lab 3 counties over, to Edmund Crane. Daniel made a deal to testify in exchange for a reduced sentence. He testified that his father had taught him the story of his aunt's theft his entire life, and that he had not learned the truth until he was 30, and that he had chosen, knowingly, to keep it buried. Ruth read the news clipping when it came. She set it in a folder. She did not call anyone about it. She did not sell the house. She kept the columns. She kept the slate roof. She paid a young man from the next valley over to climb up and patch the leak above the library. She paid a woman from town to wash the windows. She moved her books from the apartment 3 states away into the upstairs bedroom that had been hers as a girl. She turned the parlor into a reading room. She opened it to the town in the spring. She did not call it a library. She called it the Vance Reading Room because she had taken her name back, and because her father had once written her name with care in the front of a book of poetry on her 16th birthday, and because she wanted the name to mean what it had meant then. Children came on Saturdays. The deputy brought his daughter, who was 7. Ruth taught her to read the row of green leather volumes about the river country. She gave her the silver photograph frame from the dining room, the one with the whole family on the porch. She told the girl who each person had been. She told her without bitterness. She told it the way her father would have told it. She kept the bookcase in the corner of the library closed. She did not open the lower room again. She did not need to. She had taken what mattered from it, and the rest belonged to the cold of the brick. She had a carpenter come and fit a new lock to the hidden hinge. She kept the key on a chain around her neck. Some nights she touched it through her cardigan and remembered the wax seal cracking open in her hand on her first night back, and the 5 words in her brother's pen, and the long 40 years of believing what she had been told. The letter from her father, the one she had carried in the pocket of her cardigan and read by lamplight, she framed and hung above the desk in the reading room. It was short. It said he was proud of her. It said he believed her. It said the truth would find its way out in time, and that she should not waste the years waiting for it. She had waited anyway. She did not think he would have minded. She forgave him on a Sunday in May. She did it alone, in the garden, sitting in a chair under an oak that had grown taller than the house. She forgave him because he had finally told her the truth, even if only in 5 words and only after he was past punishing. She forgave him because she had built a life without him, and she did not need anything from him anymore, not even his guilt. On the day the new sign went up at the gate, she stood on the porch and watched the painter finish the second coat. The sign read Vance Reading Room. Below it in smaller letters, it read Founded 1864. Reopened by Ruth Vance. She turned the key in the front door that evening as she went out. The lock did not stick. The door swung shut clean. She walked down the porch steps to her car. She drove into town to pick up a young deputy and his daughter for supper. Behind her, the windows of the house were full of light. The chandelier in the foyer had been cleaned crystal by crystal, and now it shone the way it had shone when she was a child. The front porch no longer sagged. The gate at the end of the long drive opened easy on its hinges. She was not exiled anymore.